Imagine having your first period thousands of years ago. No pads, no medicine, no modern hygiene. For ancient women, menstruation could mean isolation, spiritual rituals, or survival itself. And yet somehow, across every culture, every continent, every era of human history, women found ways to endure. What they did, what they believed, and what they passed down might surprise you. This is the story history rarely tells. We don't have diaries from the first women who walked the earth. No cave paintings show a woman holding moss to her body, but anthropologists have spent decades piecing together clues from burial sites, tools, oral traditions, and the few written records that survived. What emerges is not a single story, but many, some beautiful, some brutal, all human. In the earliest hunter-gatherer societies, life moved with the seasons. Women tracked their cycles by the moon, not by a calendar app. They learned from mothers, aunts, grandmothers. Knowledge passed quietly, carefully, from one generation to the next. There were no pharmacies, no packaged goods, so they improvised. Moss gathered from riverbanks, softened bark, bundles of grass, animal fur, whatever absorbed, whatever didn't scratch, whatever could be washed and reused. These weren't perfect solutions, but they were solutions born of necessity and sharpened by thousands of years of trial and error. The bleeding itself was only part of the challenge. In a world without walls, without locks, without privacy as we understand it, a woman's cycle announced itself to the entire group. Some communities saw this as power. Blood meant fertility. Fertility meant the future of the tribe. Others saw it as danger, as pollution, as something that needed to be contained. The same body, the same blood, interpreted through entirely different lenses. Ancient Egypt offers us some of the earliest written glimpses into how a civilization understood menstruation. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical document dating back over 3,000 years, contains remedies for menstrual discomfort: honey, frankincense, oil. The Egyptians were practical people. They treated the body as a system to be balanced, not a mystery to be feared. Women in Egypt had more rights than in many societies that followed. They could own property, initiate divorce, run businesses. And yet, even here, menstruation carried spiritual weight. Some temple rituals required women to abstain during their cycle. Others used menstrual blood in fertility rites, believing it held the power to create life even outside the womb. Ancient Greece tells a darker story. Greek physicians, obsessed with balance, viewed menstruation as evidence of an imperfect body. Men were the standard, women were deviations. Blood leaving the body was proof of that deviation. Hippocrates and his followers developed elaborate theories. Menstrual blood could wither crops, it could rust iron, it could drive dogs mad. These weren't fringe beliefs, they were medical orthodoxy, passed from teacher to student, written into texts that would dominate Western medicine for centuries. Greek women managed their cycles with wool, linen, and sometimes nothing at all. The wealthy had slaves to assist them. The poor simply bled through their clothing and washed what they could. There was no shame in this because there was no alternative. Shame requires the possibility of concealment. For most Greek women, concealment was impossible, so they endured publicly, silently, as women have endured so much throughout history. Rome inherited Greek medicine but added its own practical innovations. Roman women had access to better sanitation than their Greek predecessors: public baths, private toilets, running water in wealthy homes. These didn't eliminate the challenges of menstruation, but they softened them slightly. A woman could wash, she could change, she could maintain some dignity. Across the Atlantic, entirely different stories unfolded. In many Native American societies, menstruation was surrounded by ceremony and respect. Some tribes believed a woman on her cycle possessed heightened spiritual power, a closer connection to the earth's rhythms. The Apache had a coming-of-age ceremony still practiced today, where a girl's first period marks her transition into womanhood with 4 days of ritual. The Navajo built special structures called hogans, where menstruating women could retreat, not as outcasts, but as participants in a tradition older than memory itself. In parts of Africa, menstrual huts served similar purposes. A woman would retreat for several days, often with other women, creating a space of solidarity and rest. Medieval Europe brought new layers of mystery and fear. The Christian Church often framed menstruation as a consequence of Eve's sin. Blood became a symbol of impurity. Women were barred from receiving communion during their cycles. They were excluded from certain religious ceremonies. And yet medieval women found ways to cope. They used rags, which is where the phrase "on the rag" originates. They developed herbal remedies passed down through generations of midwives and healers. The written record is sparse because the men who wrote it rarely thought to ask. But the knowledge survived, carried in bodies and memories. Colonialism spread European attitudes across the globe, often displacing indigenous practices with imported shame. The loss is incalculable. We will never fully know what knowledge was destroyed, what traditions were abandoned. The Industrial Revolution changed everything and nothing. Women worked through bleeding using factory rags, scrap cloth, or paper. The first disposable pads appeared in the late 19th century, but they were expensive and impractical. World War I accelerated innovation. Nurses developed disposable pads from wood pulp bandages. Kotex emerged from this context, but advertising was euphemistic, shrouded in secrecy. You couldn't say the word menstruation in polite company. The 20th century brought gradual change. Tampons arrived. The birth control pill allowed women to regulate their cycles. Feminist movements challenged the shame, demanded research, insisted that women's health be taken seriously. And yet even now, menstruation remains stigmatized. Girls miss school because they cannot afford products. The tampon tax persists. What would an ancient woman think of us? Would she envy our convenience or pity our isolation? For most of human history, menstruation was surrounded by mystery, fear, and ritual. Women supported each other across generations. Today, science explains the hormones and the precise cascade of chemicals. But knowledge is not understanding. Convenience is not dignity. The women who came before us managed with less. They bled into moss and wool and linen, into grass and bark. They endured pain without ibuprofen, embarrassment without privacy, danger without antibiotics. Their stories matter not because we should romanticize their suffering, but because we should recognize our own. The ancient woman pressing moss between her legs and the modern teenager hiding a tampon up her sleeve share something fundamental. Both are managing a body that society has never fully made room for. Both are improvising within constraints not of their choosing. Both are part of a lineage of endurance that stretches back to the very beginning of our species. We cannot go back. We would not want to, but we can remember. We can honor the ingenuity of those who found solutions where none seemed possible, and we can ask ourselves what future generations will say about whether we finally built a world where no woman has to hide, to apologize, to endure in silence. The blood has always been there. It will always be there. The only question is what we choose to make of it.